Hey everyone, it's Hilary Shepard. You might remember me from Star Trek DS9, where I played Lieutenant Hoya and Lauren, and you're listening to Trek Untold.
Hello and welcome to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. Today's guest is a multifaceted woman who was born and raised in New York City, much like myself. Well, that is to say, the part about growing up in New York, not the multifaceted woman part. She's been a singer in a band, an actress in film and television, lyricist, improv, comedian, and even board game maker. That person is Hilary Shepard. And fans of Deep Space Nine may remember her best from her brief appearance as Ensign Hoya in the Season 5 episode The Ship, but likely know her as Lauren, the overly amorous, genetically enhanced human from the episodes Statistical Probabilities and Chrysalis in Season 6 and 7 respectively. A genius with the mad intellect of Hannibal Lecter and the sex appeal of Marilyn Monroe, Lauren had an eye for men of all species, but never let that get in the way of helping her friends or solving any calculations thrown in her way. Outside of her appearances in Star Trek, Hilary has appeared in films and TV shows including Full House, Murder, She Wrote, Family Ties, Murphy Brown, The Golden Girls, Roswell, Crossing Jordan, CSI, Diagnosis Murder, and even a Meatloaf music video, which, yes, we do talk about today. But most of you may remember her best from her role as one of the best villains to ever hunt the Power Rangers, and that would be Divatox from Power Rangers Turbo, who would also return briefly in Power Rangers in Space to terrorize another group of spandex-wearing martial arts teens. She's beaming with a positive energy that's going to make you feel as happy as she sounds, and her enthusiasm and love of what she does is totally infectious. Hilary's a fan favorite at conventions, and after spending some time with her for this episode, it's easy to understand why. So get ready for a really fun hour with a performer who has done it all and then some. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Trek Untold. All one word, no spaces. If you want to check out some of our Trek Untold merchandise, you can also do that on our Teespring store, which you can find on teespring.com/stores/trekuntold, where we've got shirts, hoodies, mugs, stickers, tote bags, and all sorts of other things available to proudly display how much you like this podcast. If you're having trouble finding the link, just check us out again on social media, and you'll see us posting about it from time to time there as well. You can also support our show by visiting patreon.com/trekuntold. If you're already following us or offering us your support, thank you for your help. Most of all, if you can't support us financially, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to the show. This helps more people find out about the show and helps spread awareness of Trek Untold. I'd also like to make a quick shout out to our friends at Triple Fiction Productions, who make some great 3D printed Star Trek inspired products for toys and people, but you'll hear more about them a little bit later on. Now, without further ado, let's beam up this week's guest. Computer, access interview file.
Affirmative. Initiating program.
And welcome back to Trek Untold, and now joining me on the other side of the line, Star Trek fans may remember her from her appearance on Deep Space Nine, but I think there's a lot of other folks out there who may know her best as Divatox from Power Rangers, and of course that is Hilary Shepard. Hilary, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing great.
All right, so let's just jump right on into things, and I want to ask you the first question that we ask all of our guests here, and what is your first memory of Star Trek?
Oh my gosh, so I grew up in the 60s, so I, watched the original series, and I, watched it religiously, of course. I loved it, and I was really sad when it got canceled. I'm trying to think what my favorite episode was. I think it was when Captain Kirk goes back in time, where he's on Earth and he falls in love with this woman, but then they can't be together, and I love that unrequited romantic love type situation. But I love sci-fi, and I loved it. It was great to watch it, unfold, that show. And then back then, when things disappeared, you just never saw it again. So I'm so glad that we got to see it for years and years.
And that episode was The City on the Edge of Forever, which also had Joan Collins as that love interest.
That's right. Ooh, I just got chills. Ooh,
yeah,
I loved it.
Me too. That's a great episode, yeah.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about your origins before we jump into your acting and everything else you've done in your career, because you've got a pretty diverse career as well. You grew up in New York, right?
Yeah, I grew up on Long Island, and
Oh, so we're basically neighbors.
I
I'm here in Bayside.
oh, my mom's from Sunnyside.
Oh, very nice.
Yes, and I actually always wanted to be an actress, and we didn't know anyone, obviously, on Long Island that was an actor, and there wasn't any kind of social media, obviously, back then, so it was really just a foreign thing. And I just, even when it wasn't cool in school, I did all the plays. I went to an all-girls camp in the summer, and I was really tall, so I was always the male lead and everything. And I just knew that's all I was going to do. So I studied with I studied in New York, and then when I went to college at Northwestern and USC, that's all I did. And then I joined the Groundlings, which is a comedy improv group. And at the same time, I had an all-girl rock and roll band that
Oh
got
yeah, we're gonna talk about
deal.
that.
So, yeah, I had so many things going on. But yeah, as a kid, it was just, I was a really weird, strange looking child with glasses and braces and the whole thing. And I was always like, I'm going to be an actress someday. And everyone's like, that's nice. Sure you are. But it was really good because I had to develop a personality, because I had this beautiful older sister who was so sweet. But everyone was like, hey, Hilary, where's your sister? Where's your sister? Because everyone was obsessed with her. So I had to be the funny, cut up in the corner to get anyone to pay attention to me. So that's how I honed my comedy skills.
Huh.
And acting.
So now, were your parents involved in the creative world as well, or what do they do for a living?
No, not at all. We didn't know anyone in the business. My dad was he was in the clothing manufacturing business. He had a really successful company. He was totally self-made from like a poor family in Minnesota. My mother was an art teacher and put my dad through law school. And then she was just a stay-at-home mom and a huge, larger-than-life personality. If you guys have Instagram, check out Judaisms.NoOffense. I do my weekly Zoom calls with my mother on it, and she's like one of those, Long Island Jewish mothers that seems like a stereotype, but that's exactly who she is. So, yeah, we grew up absolutely in an artistic family, but nobody was an actor that we even knew. I remember my dad played polo, and he played polo with Burt Bacharach in the 70s, who was a famous kind of singer-songwriter back then. And I remember him arriving from Hollywood, and I got dressed in my best, daisy clips in my hair and matching daisy outfit, and with my glasses and braces. And I went to the polo fields, and I got in all the pictures, and I was totally expecting him to discover me and take me home back to Hollywood with him, because I thought that's how it works. You just get discovered. And I was so pissed when he left. I was like, what, is he blind? Didn't he notice that I'm supposed to be a famous actress and he's supposed to take me back to Hollywood? I was completely delusional on how the whole thing worked.
So how'd you go from New York City to California, since that's where you did most of your studying to become an actress, right?
Yeah, I always wanted to make it to California, but my parents wouldn't let me go off to college that far. So first I went to Northwestern, which was halfway in Chicago, and I really did not like that school. It was freezing cold in Chicago. I didn't fit in. It was very straight-laced, and I grew up, in New York City, which had like the greatest city in the world, and Chicago's great. I love it, but I didn't take to it as well. So I auditioned to get out of there. I auditioned at USC. They had a very incredible BFA program, and they only took one transfer a year, and they took me. So my parents had to let me go. So I finally got to California, and I never came back.
I think you might be the first person we've spoken to that's done improv. And you said you mentioned you did it with the Groundlings. So
Yeah.
Just tell us a little bit about that experience and what you learned while doing improv.
Oh, improv, it's the most amazing thing. I mean, you go on stage at night, people have paid, good money to see you, and they throw something at you, and you have to be on your toes and be hilariously funny. And it teaches you just I was so brave after that. I mean, I could do anything. I was never intimidated on the sets because I knew I had a quick, I had this training. I trained for like 2 years or maybe a year before you audition until they let you into the company. And, I'd seen Paul Rubens do Pee Wee Herman there. I'd just gone to a show and I got so intrigued by it. But it's been training, the best training I ever had. I mean, I also did a lot of, non-comedic acting, but that was really my sweet spot. That's why it was so amazing to get, something like Star Trek and Roswell, things that I wasn't funny in, because I really didn't know that was my strong suit. But and even when I did Power Rangers, they let me create that character, and I infused so much comedy, into the character, and they really let me fly with that. And I improvised most of my part on that movie. But yeah, I think it's invaluable for any people who want to be actors. It's still around. There's a school, you take the classes, and then you get to perform, and it's really, really, it was great.
So for our acting students out there, maybe you can share with us like a specific thing that you learned as part of the groundlings that you've held on to and that's helped you with other roles in the future.
Well, number one, it gave me confidence. I knew I could make strangers laugh on my feet, and things. So it erases your self doubt, because as an actor, you always have imposter syndrome. You're like, oh my God, why I want this job, and then you get it. You're like, why did they hire me? I can't do this. You get intimidated. So it really helped me with that. And sorry, there's a helicopter going over my house. I don't know why.
It's because they hear me on the
they're
phone.
Probably spying on. It's probably those damn Power Rangers. No, and and then also the biggest thing they teach you, which everyone knows about improv, is yes and. So you always agree. If someone says you've got a purple shirt on, you can't go like no, it's blue. You have to go yes, and it's my favorite shirt. You always have to yes and. So it puts you into the scene, and it also it puts you in the here and now. Whenever you act, the best thing to be is present in the moment and listening to the other person. So you really have to listen to your partner to make the story go forward. So that made me really a good listener and stay in the moment.
Yes, and outside of acting, you also pursued a singing career. I did that. Outside of that, you also worked on a band, the American Girls. So you're doing improv comedy. You're becoming an actress, and then you're also a singer.
It sucks back then because nobody did it back then. We were the first. We were a girl band that acted. We actually got a movie deal before we got a record deal. My best friend was Daryl Hannah at the time, and we were writing songs together. And a big manager, Miles Copeland, who managed the Police, heard us sing together and wanted to do a band around us. Daryl was originally in the band, but got really famous with Splash during the band and had to leave, which really sucked. But she's still mad at me for that whole debacle. I'm like, you're a huge movie star, like settle down. But it really wasn't a plus. I would go into auditions. They'd be like, what are you, an actress or a singer? You've got to pick one. Now everyone does everything and has clothing lines. The closest it came about that time, a couple of years later, Madonna came out in one movie, and she was doing both, but her movie career didn't take off because she's a terrible actress. She was good in Desperately Seeking Susan. She was okay, but she's never been good in anything since. But back then, you couldn't do both, And it really made me feel more like a dilettante than someone talented. I also wrote a lot of songs for movies, like in Troop Beverly Hills.
I love that song.
Became a cult classic. I wrote the Cookie song. I've written I have other songs in a movie called Tough Guys. And I wish it was more, looked on as an asset, which my agents really never did, which is so strange to me. But it just didn't happen back then.
And you mentioned Daryl Hannah. I know you've done a lot of things with her outside of acting, but I'm curious how you actually first met her. How did you become friends with Daryl Hannah?
We met in Chicago when I was at Northwestern. She was still in high school, and I was a freshman. She was 16 and I was 17, and we randomly met at a concert, and it was like we had long lost best friends. She was still in high school. She wasn't a movie star yet, and she graduated, moved out, went to USC, and then I went to USC. By the time I got there, she'd already had to drop out because she was a huge movie star. She took her 2 seconds. She was so beautiful and so sweet. People would chase her down the street and be like, please be in my movie. And one of her first big breaks was this movie, Summer Lovers. She came to visit me. I was at Warner Brothers doing like a tiny part on something, and she came to have lunch with me in the commissary, and she gets a note from Randall Kleiser, who had just done Blue Lagoon. To the blonde in the red dress, are you an actress? If so, please report to the Blue Lagoon office. And I was like, I think that note was for me, the brunette in the blue dress. But she just literally, I was like, hello, I'm the working actor over here. And she was just that amazing,
So let's take one step backwards again real quick. Just about the American Girls. Did you guys do much touring? I saw on YouTube you can listen to one of your songs, but did you guys actually tour?
Yes, we did one tour. We opened for a band called Lords in the New Church. It was a huge punk band. I ended up, they told us, don't look at those boys, don't talk to them. They set their last master on fire. They've ended in jail. And of course I ended up marrying the drummer and having 2 children with him. But, we did. We toured all over America. We were supposed to go on a tour with REM on Europe, and I think that fell through. We played with the Thompson Twins we opened for. in local clubs, we played a lot of local clubs in LA with like Guns N' Roses and people who aren't famous yet. And then, yeah, we toured with Lords of the New Church, and it was amazing. We were in this little tiny van. They were in a huge tour bus. We were in a crappy little van. And we had to drive. We had a driver, but he was nuts, and he kept having these like flashbacks from Vietnam. So we had to get rid of him. We drove ourselves. There was no GPS. We had a map, and we would end up, in the middle of these tiny little towns, in the middle of nowhere. And we were all in our full regalia. We always, back then, we looked like rock and roll stars at all times. Even if it was 100 degrees out, you had your leather on, your giant hair. We'd get out on these towns and people would like start shutting their doors and like putting close signs on the window and stuff. It was a really great way to see America, though. I'd wake up and be in another little place. We'd play small clubs across America, and it was really fun.
Oh, that's why you guys were the American girls, after all.
We were. Yeah, we were really called. It was supposed to be tongue in cheek because each of us were, we're all different ethnicities, and we wore ripped up Girl Scout uniforms and had like weenie roasts with real weenies. But then the Girl Scouts gave us like a cease and desist, and the brownies, so we had to change our uniforms.
So again, we mentioned you're doing all these different things at once. We just talked a little bit about your singing career, but back to acting. What was your first professional acting gig?
Gosh, I know what it was. I was at USC, and I got like one line in a big Warner Brothers movie. The director had seen me in a play there where I played the Queen of Hearts in Alice in Wonderland, which really came to play back. I realized when I did Divatox, I did a lot of the stuff I did in that play. I actually had 10 lines, but they cut it all. It was a blind date, and they cut it all together. So I had one line, and I got my SAG card. I got flown to New York to do this movie, and that was my very first part.
And that was Soup for One, right?
Soup for One, yeah.
That has a bunch of people who are also in Star Trek. In fact, Saul Rubinek.
Yes.
Did you get to work with him at all?
Yes. He was my date. He was my blind date. Yep.
How'd you like working with him?
He was amazing. I mean, it was his first starring role. No one had heard of him. He was from Canada. It was my very first part. And of course, the day of, I get a giant zit on my face because I'm so freaking nervous. And these women, these really old women who've done all the Woody Allen movies in New York, they were makeup and hair, and they pulled it, and it just started bleeding everywhere. It was like a disaster.
Oh.
And he was really sweet and patient because I'm like, just shoot me from this side, the whole thing. But it ended up being really great. I had one line. It was nothing, but for me, it was like the hugest deal because I was like, I'm acting in New York in a movie. It was really fun.
So I wanted to ask about one of your other earlier roles as well, from a movie in 1985 called Private Resort. And that was a Johnny Depp movie. You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
I watched the trailer. That's got to be the most 1980s thing I've ever 1980s in my life. But it looked like a lot of fun. I believe you did some scenes with Rob Morrow. So what do you remember about that movie and a young Johnny Depp?
Oh my God. First of all, he was so gorgeous. I remember being like, and he was so sweet. He just moved there from Florida. He was not famous yet. I think he'd done one movie, but he was breathtakingly beautiful, tiny, smaller than me, because I'm like 5'10". And he was married, and he was young, and he couldn't drive. So he could drive, but he was afraid to drive on the freeway. So we lived right near. So I would pick him up, and I would get on the freeway to get us to the set, and he would hide under my seat, like freaking out every time I changed lanes. I remember that about him. And I'm still friends with his ex-wife, Hilary Depp, to this day. And whenever I see him, he's always very sweet and always remembers me. And yeah, it was a huge deal. We were all, we were on location together. It was a lot of shooting days. And yeah, it was fun. It was really fun. Just interesting watching him become a huge movie star. And Rob, too. Rob became like a big TV star.
I'm not sure if I'm confusing you with someone else in the movie because I was only able to find the trailer, but there's a character who I think is you. It looks like she's like exposing herself to Rob. Is that you or is that a different character?
Yeah, that was me. Yeah.
So yeah,
got to know my family.
Yeah. So what's that like? So that's fairly early in your career, and you're doing basically
that was horrible.
Yeah.
I was really pressured to it. I shouldn't have done it. I got the part, and then they pressured me into it, and it was my first big starring role in a comedy, and I remember just feeling like, I really don't want to do this, but I guess I have to make it, and I just wish I had better advice because I had already signed on the movie and I really didn't have to, and it was just creepy and horrible.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I saw that and I was like, I was wondering if that was actually you or not. I'm sorry to hear that you had to do that. Thankfully today things have changed and hopefully have gotten better for folks, but at least there's some positive memories besides that one horrible thing from it.
Yeah, there were.
So you were also in one of our other favorite non-Star Trek shows that we love to talk about here on Trek Untold, and that was The Golden Girls. And you were in the season 4
Oh,
episode, Rites of Spring. You played Yvonne, the aerobics instructor who helps the
oh my,
ladies get fit. What do you recall about being on that set?
oh my gosh, it was amazing. I mean, that was a huge phenomenon, that show. And I remember auditioning for it against all these I didn't work out really, all these workout people.
Could have
And I
fooled
think
me.
I know, I did go to, I actually did go to Jane Fonda classes, and she actually taught the classes, Jane Fonda's workout, the classes I went to. She really did. But, it was so fun. And I remember lining up with all the women because you shoot in front of a live audience, and they were all so sweet to me. And I remember lining up with everyone, like get to go out onto the stage. And I'm like, is this my life for real? Like, it was so cool. I loved it. And this part is like, people freak out to this day. You know, every time it's on TV, people text me or Instagram me, or, you know, it's really held up. And my outfit, my 80s workout outfit, is the best.
Oh,
my
yeah.
hair. Yeah, that was really fun.
I just actually got to watch it, in fact, as part of me doing research for this, and I always love getting an excuse to watch The Golden Girls as part of anything. And yeah, I love the outfits that the ladies are also wearing too. Did you ever see any of the clashes between Bea Arthur and Betty White? I heard those two didn't get along on set. Did that happen on the day you were there?
I didn't see it at all. I just remember Betty White was the nicest one of all of them. And I remember Bea Arthur stood uncomfortably close to me all the time. I was like, but no, I didn't see that at all. Not at all.
And how tall is Bea Arthur? Because she's a pretty tall woman, and you yourself are also fairly tall.
5'10". She was towering over me.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's that like to have Bea Arthur that close to you and that high above you, for lack of a better term?
I remember she had a huge goiter in her neck, and my eyes were like right at her goiter. That's all I remember.
So you also did 2 episodes of Full House in 1992. You were Julie Hartman, a local DJ, and you got to do some scenes with Jon Stamos and Dave Coulier. That must have been a lot of fun also.
Yeah, that was really fun too. I mean, you don't know that these things are classics until they are. I was also on Family Ties with Michael J. Fox.
Yes.
And also years later, I did a show with the Olsen twins where they had their own show called So Little Time. So I got to work with them again, and they lived right near me, and my daughters went to school with them, and they were always so sweet and nice and remembered me. And I remember my daughters came to visit me on the set when I did So Little Time, and they were obsessed with the Olsen twins. That's the only time they ever cared when I was in something. They just totally ignored everything else, and including the Power Rangers, because they just weren't into it, which was really annoying. And well, my little one she was a newborn, but my 5-year-old could have cared less. But they came on the set, and they kept asking me, are those the real Olsen twins, or are they in costumes? And they kept looking like behind them to see if there was, zippers, if they were going to zip out of their costumes like in Disneyland. They just couldn't believe they were the real ones.
So what do you remember about Jon Stamos and Dave Coulier in particular?
Okay. Well, he was hilariously funny. I really liked him. But the one thing, I'd never watched the show. I mean, back then, you didn't have like DVRs and things. So if you weren't at home, which I wasn't in my 20s watching TV, I didn't really know. All these shows became classics to me later, but I didn't know what I was dealing with. And I remember I had to say Jesse Stephanopoulos, and he kept being like, that girl can't pronounce my name. She's not a fan. She doesn't watch the show. He was really pissed about that. I'm like, sorry, I never saw the show before. Oops.
All right, so we've now come to around 1996, and that is when Hilary Shepard makes her debut in the Star Trek universe. And you were in the episode Season 5, The Ship. We actually interviewed Caitlin Hopkins, who was also in that episode. She played the Vorta Kilana. But you were Ensign Hoya, I believe. You were a Benzite who was piloting a runabout, and you didn't last too long in the episode. Unfortunately, you don't make it past the first act of it. But yeah, let's talk about just getting into the Star Trek world. So how did you get cast for this role?
I got cast because one of my best friends, Laura Bear, who was also my writing partner, her husband was Ira Stephen Bear, and I kept bugging him to be on the show. And finally, I don't think I had to audition. No, they just gave me that part. And it was amazing. But then I got really nervous because I'm like, well, maybe I'm not even right for this part, and maybe I'm not good in this part. But anyway, I had to get there at 4 a.m. and they had to do the crazy makeup on me. And by the time they finished, they couldn't really write my voice. They couldn't really hear my voice. So anyway, they had sent me the pages the couple of days before, and it was a really hard dialogue, and it was like 3 pages long of me just talking, and then I die. So I get on the set and they're like, listen, we have one take to do this and you can't mess it up because we're going to blow up your ship at the end. So you can't mess it up. So they're like, okay, action. So I'm like, I can't hear anything. I'm like, and they're like, cut. What are you saying? I'm like, on the script. They're like, that's the old script. You didn't get the new pages. I'm like, no one ever sent them to me. So like, they were like so mad, not at me, but whoever didn't do it. But they're like, listen, we're really sorry. You have 15 minutes. We got to shoot this. Can you just try to memorize it early right now? And that's when, and on Star Trek, you cannot improvise. You literally can't say and instead of the. If you want to change anything, they have to go down to like the writer's office and ask, and you cannot mess with their words. So I had so much pressure on me, and I just remember like sweating under my thing, and they're like, it's not your fault, but you got to do this. And I did it, but I just remember thinking, oh my God, they're never going to hire, they probably hate me. I'm so embarrassed in front of Ira, but it worked, but I felt guilty even though they sent me the wrong script. And, they called me in and they're like, you have to do ADR now because we couldn't, your voice was like this. So it all worked out anyway. And I did it really well. And I had to redo my voice anyway in post because it was so muffled. And then that's why a couple of years later, they asked me to do this other part. I was shocked because I thought they hate me. That part I had to audition for.
See, was this the first time you ever had to wear heavy prosthetics for a role?
Well, you know what? I don't remember because I did Scanner Cops, and I don't know if that was before or after. And Scanner Cops, my head explodes, so I had to have a full body, cast made of me where they put that plaster on your face and you cannot breathe and it's on your neck and you have straws coming out of your nose, and if you freak out, you have to do it again. I've had to do that, and I had to do that on Friday the 13th as well, that TV series. So I've done heavy prosthetics bunches of times. This was not heavy prosthetics compared to what I had to do for Friday the 13th and Scanner, because I had to make those. I hated doing that when they put that plaster cast on you. Oh, it's the worst.
Now, when you film these scenes for this episode we're talking about here for the ship, pretty much it's you and I think one other ensign is on board the ship with you. Did you get to interact though with any of the other stars of the show?
No, not at all. I remember I was like, walk to the set. They're like, shoot this now. Don't mess it up. You got, we have one take. And then, that was it. No, I was just sitting there. I was there all morning getting my makeup on. But then when we shot it, I remember it was like probably 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, I'm done? Oh, cool. So weird, but no, I didn't meet anybody,
Trek Untold will return momentarily. Trek Untold is brought to you by Triple Fiction Productions. If you're a Star Trek cosplayer looking for props, or toy collector looking to spice up your shelves, Triple Fiction Productions has you covered. Triple Fiction Productions produces affordable and unique 3D printed Trek-inspired products from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the movies. You can expect the same amount of care and attention to detail in any of the items in their catalog, whether it's a prop replica for use in a fan film, or a part of a cosplay, or accessories and playsets for figures from Playmates, Migos, or Diamond Select. Own your very own tricorder or phaser rifle with working lights, the bridge of the Enterprise E for your Playmates figures, or any other item from countless species and ships from the Star Trek universe. All products are 3D printed in the USA and are constantly evolving and improving based on fan feedback. To learn more about their products, visit them at triple-fictionproductions.net or on Facebook at facebook.com/triplefictionproductions. Triple Fiction Productions, taking Star Trek where no 3D printer has gone before.
Wrestling is on two levels right now. Either you all in and having a good time of what's going on and enjoying the body slams, headlocks, submissions, and the tope suicidas, or you're just pissed the hell off of what's going on in the wrestling landscape. What kind of wrestling podcast has the same kind of dilemmas? Your guys here at Turnbuckle Tabloid. Jada Rest Santine Olski is here to bring to you the ridiculousness, the buffoonery, the nonsense, and all that is just straight wrestling. We're here with that opinionated New York swag and the ridiculousness that goes along with it. Get us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play Music, Google Podcasts, wherever you can get podcasts. Turnbuckle Tabloid, you don't want to miss it. And we're here every week, unlike some wrestling promotions. Laters.
We now return to Trek Untold.
So Hilary, you mentioned you came back then to do season 6. You returned as Lauren, who was an augmented human, She shows up in the episode Statistical Probabilities, and you again played her later in season 7 for Chrysalis. So we mentioned you already auditioning for her. What do you remember about Lauren?
Well, I remember they described her as she's a nymphomaniac and the smartest woman in the universe. And so my husband at the time, this is why he's my ex, said, that's the opposite of you. You're really going to have to act. I'm like, ha, ha, ha. So anyway, I remember my take on it was almost like Hannibal Lecter. I remember he was so scary and so smart because all these people are dangerous as well. So I remember going to my audition, and when I walked in, there was Pottsy from,
Oh yeah, Anson Mount. He directed that episode of Happy Days.
Pottsy. I'm like, Potsy's gonna direct me, really? But I had to keep a straight face, and I just played it very different than everyone else. They told me I played her very still. I just looked everyone in the eye. I was very direct, and they just said they really loved my take on it. So that was great because I really felt like I earned that part. I had to, audition and that was really exciting. And then they changed a lot of the dialogue because they loved my interpretation, so they made it to fit me. And I remember Anson I was always laying down. If you notice in the first episode, I was always laying down. I was the first person to ever get beamed up or beamed down, laying down. Because he wanted me to be like a kitty cat. That's what I was like. I was like Hannibal Lecter meets a kitty cat, and then, so he wouldn't let me sit up. The second time I think
first one you danced in. I think the second one you sang in.
Yeah.
We'll cover all that stuff. and I said it was Anson Williams. It's Anson Williams, not Anson Mount. I always get them confused.
That's right. Anson Williams. Yeah.
Somehow I get them confused, even though they're completely different people. As you mentioned, you had your very interesting interpretation of Lauren. But I'm curious, what did you pull from for yourself to actually play the character? Aside from Hannibal Lecter, was there someone else that you pulled from to get the more amorous part of her?
No. Yeah, my cat.
So I was going to say Marilyn Manson or something like that, but no, it's actually your cat.
No. My cat.
Or Marilyn Monroe. Oh my God, I'm saying the wrong names right now.
No, not at all. Just my cat, and and a little bit of Catwoman. I was obsessed with Catwoman from the original Batman series, and I used her, and I also used that when I played Divatox.
So Lauren was part of this, as they called them on the show, the Jack Pack, a group of genetically engineered augments who were brought to Deep Space Nine to get some help from Dr. Bashir. And this self-proclaimed group of mutants consisted of Tim Ransom as Jack, Faith C. Saley as Serena, and the late Michael Keenan as Patrick. And I gotta say, rewatching these episodes, you guys had such an amazing rapport together. Did that come from rehearsals, if there were rehearsals, or was that just natural for you guys to come across on that way on screen?
You really don't have rehearsals. You literally get on the set, and then you rehearse in so much as you run it, and they tell you where you're going to stand. And I mean, we had crazy dialogue. I had to speak, I didn't know what the hell I was talking about, and you have to really sound like you know what you're talking about. So we all really had to buckle down and concentrate, and I thought it was so well cast. I loved working with these people. They were all so sweet. We all would eat together, and I remember after we shot, everyone's like, "You guys have amazing chemistry. We were going to bring you back," and I was really happy when they did. I thought I was amazed at everybody. I thought everybody was really, really good in their jobs, and it elevates your game when everybody's so good on the set, including obviously the regulars on the show are amazing actors and really into their jobs. So I loved Siddig, who I had to be obsessed with. He was so sweet because it was embarrassing. I was hitting on him, and and he just took it really well, and we had great chemistry, and. It was really great when you're working with such a finely oiled machine and everybody's on their game. It's just nothing better when you're an actor.
Yeah, what do you remember about the first time meeting Siddig?
I remember thinking, wow, this is not going to be hard to try to hit on him the whole time. And he was just very humble, very sweet. I've been on shows where you're the guest star and everyone's like, you're just here for the day, the week, you're not one of us. It wasn't like that at all. He wanted to rehearse. He wanted to, talk about our characters. He really was into it and wanted to, do the best job that we could. And he made everyone feel really comfortable. Yeah, I was really impressed with him.
I'd heard that you had a tough time doing one of those scenes with Alexander, with Siddig, when you had to dance with him. Can you tell us about that?
I'm the hugest klutz that ever lived. I might have looked like a dancer, but I cannot move. And Ira Bear's wife, Laura, who was a good friend of mine, she's an amazing ballet dancer and choreographer, and she came in to choreograph the scene, and she's like, oh, Jesus, because she knows me. So they had a huge crane shot set up and all this stuff, and I kept stepping all over his feet. They're like, kill the crane shot. Like, just shoot her from the waist up. I cannot. I'm the biggest klutz that ever lived. It's terrible. I'm a lefty. I don't know right from my left. Even, in workout classes, everyone's going to the right. I'm going to the left. So it was just a disaster. But it was funny. I mean, luckily it was Laura who was choreographing it, because she just thought it was hilarious,
And while we're discussing these mildly embarrassing stories about Deep Space Nine, before we get to more nitty-gritty stuff here, in Chrysalis, you also had to do some singing in that episode. And I heard you also had a few issues with that part too, right?
Oh, no, that wasn't it. Faith and I could sing, and that was great. It was a really hard aria, and they sent us, to like in Paramount, they had like a music area, and then some person was teaching it to us, and it's very precise and it has to be on point. And nobody could sing but me and Faith. So when we shot it, everyone's like, Faith and I are like perfectly, tuned together, and everyone's like, so we're like, that's not going to work. So we reshot it, and Faith and I got to sing, but everyone else got their voices dubbed.
Because it sounded really great in the end result, so I was impressed, but now I know the secret.
So we went into the studio, and Faith and I got to sing with like professional singers, and luckily they let us sing because they realized we could, because I would have been mad if someone else sang for me. And the other people were very funny about it. They knew they couldn't sing, and we had to be perfect at everything, genetically engineered, so they were good sports about it. But it was really funny.
I've heard that the Deep Space Nine set in particular was more of like a serious set in a lot of ways, and the 2 episodes that you did here as Lauren are a little bit more lighthearted. So how did you find the set environment? How did it feel to you?
Yeah, I know. You know what? We had so much work to do. We had so much dialogue. We were just working the whole time. It was a very nice set. Everybody was sweet to us. It wasn't a scary set. There's no idiots or assholes on the set, but it's very serious. And also, you do not change one word. So you've got to get your dialogue precisely. And I'm used to improvising and being funny and adding this. And so I had to really, show restraint. So everybody was very serious, but it wasn't like stressful. It was just more, we just knew we had to buckle down. I remember they had great food. And then I remember there was fans that would come to the set and deliver like homemade cookies and beautiful things to everyone, because there were so many fans. I think someone had won a contest and got to come on the show, and I remember that. But I loved the environment. Was great. It wasn't oppressive or anything.
So of those 2 episodes you did as Lauren, one of them was directed by Jonathan West, but I want to ask you a little bit more about Anson Williams, who we mentioned, of course, Pottsy from Happy Days. He did a few episodes of DS9 and Voyager. What was it like being directed by Pottsy?
At first, I was like, do I want to take direction from Pottsy? Like, hello. But he was actually really good. Yeah, I liked his ideas, and it was interesting. And he worked hard, to try to not be Pottsy. So, he overcame that. So, yeah, he was good.
How would you describe his style of directing? Was he like an actor's director, or was he a director's director?
Oh, definitely an actor's director. Actors who become directors are my favorites because they understand the process. They also know, there's a lot of directors that will intimidate and yell, and that doesn't work for actors. That just makes you clam up and feel worse, So he understood the environment you need to work in and collaborative environment about it.
So in that episode, Chrysalis, Lauren becomes very smitten with Nog, who at this point is an ensign in Starfleet. And Aaron Eisenberg sadly passed away not that long ago. But do you have any Aaron Eisenberg stories you could tell with us today?
No, I'm sorry, I don't. I think he was in makeup a lot of, most of the time. And then I just remember meeting him in makeup, like on the set, but I didn't. I wish I did. Sorry.
Well, did you run into any of the other actors who were part of the show that may not necessarily have been part of the episode, but you got to at least interact with? Did you meet like Avery or Nana or Renee, even any of those folks?
I did. I met all of them, and they were so sweet. That's what I really liked about that set, because they weren't stuck up and like you're just like a day, a week. You're just a guest star, which happens a lot. They're very welcoming. I can't remember the Irish actor's name. He was in a scene with us. Yeah, I love him. I've seen like every movie of his, so I was really intimidated by him, and he was just great. He didn't make you feel that way at all. But everybody is really, it's a no nonsense set. Like everyone's there to do their work, and everyone's friendly and sweet. But it's definitely like a working set, because that's a lot of work. That's like shooting a movie in a week, every single week, and it's like clockwork. You got to get it done, and it's costumes, it's makeup, it's very precise. Every department really, you know, because it's such a watched show. The fans are so rabid that they can't make any mistakes. The fake languages they speak have to be right on. Because they really know their fans are watching their every move, and they want to do a great job for them. So every single department ran like clockwork.
And was anything different about being on a Star Trek show as opposed to any other stuff you'd been on at that point? Like the environment of the set, the costumes,
Oh
anything like
my
that. Was that
God.
all? How was that for
Can
you?
you imagine? Can you imagine being a child watching Star Trek and then going on the set where it's all built? We went up on the galley. We walked all over. There's all different sets where you're in the ship, outside the ship, gazing out into the universe. It's mind blowing. It was a great moment as an actor for me, because that was one of my dreams as a kid. I wanted to be on Batman, but that wasn't still on. But I always wanted to be on Star Trek. And to have it come true and to be walking around the sets, I mean, it was amazing. Was so lucky. I was like, pinched myself, and I felt really good because I'd really earned the role, and beat out a lot of other people to get it. And and even Ira was like, look, I couldn't give you that part, and you really earned it, because this is a serious part, and so that felt really, really good too.
So, did you watch yourself on any of those episodes when they first debuted on TV?
Yes, I did. I mean, this is so strange. So back then, you would have to hire. There's one guy in Hollywood. Anytime we were on the TV, he would find it for you, and he would tape it for you. And he lived in this house in Hollywood. I can't remember his name. He was really overweight and almost like a hoarder, because every single room was just filled with VHS tapes. And you'd call him up and you would pay him and go, look, I'm going to be, I don't know when it's on, but I'm going to be on Star Trek. They didn't even tell you when your shows were on. So he would track it for you and find you, and then he would tape them for you. So I got to see. I don't think I watched it live because you didn't know when it was on, and I had 2 children at that point, and I think I was also shooting Power. Oh yeah, I was shooting Power Rangers at the same time when I did the second episode. They were really nice with my schedule, and I just had a baby, and so I was shooting this Power Rangers series at the same time, the second episode. So I didn't have time to watch myself. So this guy would tape everything for me.
I think since you brought it up, I think we have to talk about Power Rangers, right? I mean, it's only fair. I think that's.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I don't know if the fans. It's not really a crossover fandom. Whenever I do a Star Trek convention, they're very disdainful of Power Rangers, and then the Power Rangers are just. They're a little more interested in the Star Trek, but they're very separate fandoms. Have you noticed? I mean, you probably don't know, but
luckily for me, I'm a fan of both, so it makes my life easy.
You are? Yay, a crossover. My favorite.
Yeah, and of course, you've done plenty of panels and things about Divatox already. You were Divatox in Turbo, the movie, and the TV series, and you also appeared a few times in Power Rangers in Space. And I know you've talked in great detail about your role as Divatox, which, folks, if they really want to hear it, they can look it up on YouTube, many of your panels. But I'm curious to ask you about your action figure, because you're the first guest in the show who's had an action figure themselves.
Love my action figure so much. It was incredible, and it really does look like me. And then, it's so funny, years later, my younger daughter, who was a baby, I was pregnant during the Power Ranger movie with her. That's why I stepped away from the series when they were shooting until I could come back. I missed the first 20 episodes. And she became friends with a little boy, and his father was the one who made the action figure, which was interesting. Yeah, they took a ton of pictures of me, and it's really cool to have one. And then I was in France at a wedding, and I went into a store to buy my daughter some presents, and there was a mini action one of me in my submarine with all my different creatures, and I was teeny tiny, like 2 inches tall. And I bought it. I tried to explain to them that was me, but it was France, and they didn't care. I was like, "Can you give me this?" So there's another play set that I love that I still have. So I have. They gave me a case of the action. Not a case. I think they gave me 10 action figure dolls, and I gave them stupid. Went to Ira and Laura Bear, but I gave them away to people, and I should have kept them. I have one still in its package, and then a fan sent me another one, so I have 2, but I should have kept them. I didn't realize how precious they were.
So we talked to Juliana Donald fairly recently on the show as well. She was in Star Trek, but one of her earliest roles was in a Muppets movie, and she talked to us about the challenges of working with Muppets. What was it like for you to be doing Power Rangers, where basically you have to react while you've got characters who can't move their faces in any way or can talk to you, respond to you in any way?
Yeah, they can't hear you because they're in the suits. They clonk into you because they can't see a thing. And then there's another act. There's just a person off stage reading their lines like, "Oh, Auntie Diva, come here," like not real actors. So the person inside the suit isn't acting, and later they dub the voices in. So you just really, that's when the good improvising and believing in yourself comes into play. And I would use it, like when they would bump into me, it'd be like, "Get off, you stupid Christmas tree ornament," or whatever. I would just use whatever would happen because they would stumble upon you, hit you with their things, and they were idiots. So that's perfect. So I just used it.
Yeah, you mentioned a little bit about where this character came from, and I can really feel that improv in it. I love the character Divatox. She's just such a perfectly great heel, horrible, evil villain. But yeah, tell us a bit more about how you developed the character, how you developed the voice and the movement for Divatox.
Playing an evil queen really came natural to me, I have to say. Came naturally. When you're tall and dark with, kind of weird blue eyes, that's what you get cast in. So I've kind of been training my whole life. But I definitely think from watching Catwoman, from evil characters were always my favorite. I never voted for like the good guys. So I always related to them, and I don't know, it just came naturally to me. I can't explain it. I just knew right away who she was, and I would say to them, "Look, let's make her really vain, and they would make special props for me, like a mirror." There's things that were cut out. I was reading like Vogue in Space magazine, and I thought let's just make her the most self-obsessed person that ever lived, because to be a queen, you really have to be, and to be a total bitch like she was, and to think that she could rule the world. It came easy. What can I say?
So I'm gonna try and find like the most polite, respectful way to say this, but I'm curious how you felt about the costume you had to wear, because I'm pretty sure you've probably heard things from a lot of Power Rangers fans. You may have helped a lot of young boys hit puberty. I'm just kind of curious what you thought about wearing that outfit, because it was quite a revealing outfit for a Power Rangers villain to have.
All right. Well, what happened is the day I got the movie is the day I found out I was pregnant, and I didn't want to tell them because I thought they were going to fire me. And I thought, okay, I'm going to tell the costume lady. They'd already made the costume. They'd already approved. And I said, "Look, just make it so it, this is my second pregnancy. I don't really show I'm very long waisted, but just make it so we can like let it out a little bit." So by the time the movie was over, I was 6 months pregnant. So I had huge boobs. Not bad of a stomach. I'm really lucky that I don't, show a lot. But my boobs just kept getting bigger and bigger, and also we would shoot out of sequence. So if you see the movie, sometimes they're small, sometimes they're big. And I remember when they came to me, they said, "Look, we want you to do the series, but we're going to have to change your costume." I'm like, I won't. By the time I do the series, I won't have those boobs anymore. If you watch the series, they're completely down again, But they covered me up more. But that was completely accidental. But I think it was great, because I also wanted to give all the poor parents who had to sit through these movies with their kids 20 times, not only with my humor, because a lot of the humor I did, I knew kids wouldn't get, but they would get, but, they get to look at me. So good for them.
It's still a great role. It's still a wonderful performance, and I still love that costume, so thank you for that. And just on that note of action figures as well, I'm just, as the toy collector, are you, or have you spoken to anybody from Hasbro about being part of their Power Rangers Lightning collection of figures?
No, I don't. I wouldn't know who to speak to.
Oh, we need to change that. We need to make that happen.
I know. I've had people tweet at me and say, "We need to start a thing." And I'm like, I don't really do Twitter that much. So I come and go on that thing. And I don't know. So you make it happen. You do it.
All right. I'll find a way. I'll get it done for Divatox.
Find a way. Make it make it your raison d'etre.
It's my life's mission now.
That's right. A new mission, should you choose to accept it.
Now, aside from Divatox being this great evil character, you played another evil character that I think our fans might not be as aware of, and that was in Meatloaf's music video for his ballad "I'd Lie for You."
See?
Yes.
I always do that.
Tell us a little bit about tell us a little bit about being in a Meatloaf music video. And that's a bizarre music video, I gotta say. It's like this crazy deep love ballad, and then meanwhile in the background there's you in a Jeep with some like fascist looking guy. There's explosions and gunfights, and it's crazy.
So the guy who played that is Xander Berkeley, who, if you watch The Walking Dead, he had a huge part in that. Walking Dead, he was the leader of Hilltop. So anyway, interesting side note. Brett Cullen, who played the lead in it, was a friend. His wife Michelle Little and I had done a movie called Radioactive Dreams together, and so he suggested me for the part to Meatloaf. And I remember we drove out. It was supposed to be like a 3-day shoot into the desert. And unfortunately, the day before I got there, or the day I got there, there was a terrible helicopter accident where 2 people died in a helicopter crash making our video. So we were there for like weeks while they decided what they were going to do. And I remember like a week later, they set up another helicopter, and I had like this huge wig on with long, long hair, and they wanted to fly right behind me. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it. Didn't you learn anything from the helicopter crash? I was like, no, thanks. So I really put my foot down, but wasn't a great shoot because people had died, so I don't have like fond memories of that shoot at all. It was really freaky and horrible, and I felt terrible. It was a father and son. So wah, sorry. But yeah, it wasn't great, but I did love that character. And I remember when I got that character, I was like, these are the kind of parts I want to play. I wish somebody would cast me like in a movie like that, and I love being the crazy witch. It's like the best.
Now, did you get to interact with Meatloaf offset at all?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, he was great. Everyone called him Meat. I was like, okay. I was like, Mr. Loaf. He's like, call me Meat. So yeah, he was great. It wasn't a great atmosphere because of what had happened though.
I mean, the reason I bring it up is because I've heard like these days he can be a little curmudgeonly, especially at signings and that kind of thing. I've got a friend who's like one of the nicest people in the world, and he was just absolutely rude to her for like no reason. So like, was he nice to everybody on set, or was there like a little temper in him?
No, he was nice. I just think everybody was so freaked out over what had happened that I can't really judge, and I don't have any. But I have heard that about him. I think because we were working for him and all trying to make this video together, that he was nice to us, maybe. But I have heard that he is a curmudgeon.
So on a little bit more of a happier note, I'd like to ask you about Diagnosis Murder, another show that you were in an episode of.
Oh yeah.
And I'm just curious, did you get to do anything with Dick Van Dyke?
Yes, I did. And I was so excited. And when I got the part, I remember I had my 2 kids then, and I was just like, I don't know, maybe it's just one kid. Who the hell? It's all the blur. But I remember my babysitter had to leave, and I was waiting and waiting. So I just went, like, knocked on the door of the audition. I'm like, look, I have to go. If if you can see me, great. If you can't. And they said they really loved my attitude. I was like, wow, because that could have backfired. But I remember when I got the job and I went on the set and I got to work with Dick Van Dyke, I was like, I am such a huge fan of yours. And he was like, oh, you don't know me. I'm like, I watched the Dick Van Dyke show, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Like, I went through all his, and he was so sweet, so nice. And I remember his son was on the show, and he was really nice. And everyone was like shocked because he was a more standoffish person, but he was he really liked me. So that was great. I was so happy to work with Dick Van Dyke. That was just like my dream come true, because as a kid, Mary Poppins. I mean, really?
Was he one of the hardest actors to work with, where you had to try and keep yourself composed while doing a scene?
Yeah, and I had to cry. I remember I had to cry, but he put me at ease right away when I told him what a huge fan I was, and he couldn't believe that I was old enough to know who he was, instead of going, sure, I'm the huge star. Like, he was so humble that it put me at ease right away. And then I just had to really concentrate on like getting my tears out, which is hard, take after take after take,
Yeah, I mean, how do you actually do that? We haven't really talked to a lot of folks who've had to do a lot of on-scene crying, or at least I haven't asked about it. But since you brought it up, I mean, how the heck does an actor cry for a scene and continue to do that again and again, keep it real?
Yeah, I mean, I learned the hard way, because a lot of times, you do different shots. You do an establishing shot where the camera's far away from you and they're getting the whole scene in. Then they come in for your close-ups, and your 2 shots and a close-up. Save your tears for the close-up. I remember just crying hysterically first in the, not on this show, but when I was first starting. And then by the time I got to my close-up, I was like dried up. I'm like, shoot. But I would listen to music. I would get myself into a state of, but the best thing I really learned, and this is what worked for me. I mean, a lot of my acting, they teach you substitution, where you're not really in the scene. You're like thinking of your dog died or whatever, But for me, I like to really pretend. Like, you remember when you're a kid and you're just playing pretend, and you're like, it's so real to you. I just like to play pretend. I am that woman who's got a crazy person after them, and I just really believe that's my life. And it's so easy to do on a set, because if you just can ignore the cameras, you're in a police station, people are in their outfit. They make it really easy for you to play pretend.
Yeah.
And that's what I do. That works for me. I mean, everyone has their own thing, but I just pretend, and it works.
So one other thing you were in I want to talk about real quick is The 40-Year-Old Virgin. You were in that movie with Steve Carrell. What do you remember from being on that?
It was really fun, but I was like cut out, so that wasn't that fun. It was the funnest set. My friend Shauna produced it. She just asked me to show up, and my friend Liz Carey, and I remember we had to like make out and be, lesbians together. And I think that was in the our version, but what was so great about that set, it was hysterical. We were all improvising. They were very loose, and when you have a big budget, they're not in a hurry. Like, it's so different than doing a TV show where you have to get everything right. And I remember I thought of a really funny shot where Steve would walk in and he was on the dance floor just standing there, and people were dancing around him, and he was like getting battered back and forth. And I told that to my friend Shauna. She told it to the director, and he liked it and shot that. And that ended up being in all the coming attractions. I was in every coming attraction dancing against him, grinding on him while he stood there like, help me. And that wasn't even in the movie, which was weird. But I remember like, wow, they used my shot and they used it as the coming attraction. That was cool. And I remember how funny Paul Rudd was. He won't remember me, but we were riffing together because you're just standing there, and he would say something and I would say something. That's my favorite thing, but none of the things were in the movie.
That's unfortunate, but at the plus side, you got to grind on Steve Carell, and that's really an accomplishment right there that few of us can claim.
Yeah, exactly.
So just jumping real short back to your past here, we talked about Johnny Depp earlier, but you were in a movie from 1987 called Hunk, and I think one of the most notable things about that is that Brad Pitt was in that film very early on as basically an extra.
That is so funny. Well, I didn't realize this. I remember I was in Hawaii one year on vacation, and the Oscars were on, and I was like at at the hotel bar, and I remember people had it on, and all of a sudden they're like, Oscars 2000 whatever, and they're like, show me, and they're like, oh, why are they talking about me for the Oscars? And then they go from behind me, and they do a close up, and Brad Pitt is right behind my shoulder. And and he was just an extra, and I had no freaking idea. I was acting up a storm in front of him, and there was Brad Pitt right behind me. I did not see him, did not know he existed, completely didn't. I was like, how did I miss him? But it was his first job, and he was just an extra, so I was probably a snot and didn't talk to the extras. I don't know. But the weirdest part about that is that Deborah Shelton, who played the lead, her husband was Shuki Levy at the time, who at that time, he was an Israeli composer who came over. He didn't really speak English, but he sat on the set and he watched me. Later, he became, one of the owners of the Power Rangers.
Yep.
And he remembered me when I came to audition. And he said, I remember you from that movie. I said, one day I'm going to work with that girl. And I think that really helped me get the part. So you never know who's out there watching you or what who's going to hire you.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how small of a world Hollywood really is.
Yeah, it really is.
So, Hilary, you have been a singer, you've been an improv comic, you've been an actress, you're also a board game maker. Tell us a little bit about that.
I'm such a weirdo.
Oh, that's a great resume to have. I mean, I wish I had something crazy and as big and broad as that, too.
I mean, Daryl Hannah and I, as you know, we're best friends, and we used to have game nights all the time, and we would play games, and we would start making up games, and our made-up games would start getting so popular in Hollywood. Like, I remember Jamie Lee Curtis coming up just going, oh, we played your game the other night that, with other people, and we're like, we better freaking manufacture these before people start ripping us off. So that's how that came to be. Of course, all the game, they're still sold on Amazon, and we get no money for it. The game company we sold it to went bankrupt, and someone bought all their old stock. So we have a game called Library, L-I-E-Brary, where you make up first lines of books, and we don't get any money for it. So we got ripped off anyway. But it was fun. We did 3 games, and it was so fun. Daryl and I love working together. Right now we have our, like I mentioned before, Judaism's No Offense, which is our Instagram, where it's my mom, who's hilarious. It's actually me playing my mom. My mom's, died a couple of years ago, but Daryl and I, Daryl grew up with my mom, and everything she says on this Instagram is word for word. Nothing is made up. And she and I are working on that together, and it's actually being looked at to be, more than just an Instagram, but it's early days right now, so we'll see what happens with that. But everything kind of stopped during the coronavirus pandemic, but I think that character is going to be developed into something more, but we love working together.
Now, I want to ask you about what's coming up in the future for Hilary Shepard, and I know one of those things is a movie called The Order, which has got a pretty big crew of Star Trek folks there. You got Marina Sirtis in that, Nichelle Nichols. And there's also a few Power Rangers people in there too. You got Austin St. John, Walter Jones, David Yost, Catherine Sunderland. I mean, this is something else. Tell us a little bit about this.
That was just put together by Karen Ashley, who was one of the Power Rangers. She's amazing. And also, I can't think of his name. He played the guy in the tube in Power Rangers. They had all the money. We started shooting, and then something really strange happened. They get all the money from GoFundMe, and then something strange happened, and we got shut down, and we never really found out what happened. So I don't know if that movie's still going to go. I felt so bad for Karen. She, lost her shirt on that movie, and she'd raised all this money. She had to give it all back. It was very strange. I really don't know the ins and outs of it, but it was going to be a great movie. I don't know if that's going to get made. Basically, right now, I moved out of Los Angeles to Newport Beach to be with my husband, and we live on the bird reserve. You saw my house for a second there, and I'm really retired. I mean, I surfed up until a while ago. I got in a bad surf accident in Fiji in October, but the only things I've been doing, and this weekend it's going to be on Lifetime. I do tons of movies for Lifetime, and I just do them because they call me and I go. I don't audition. I don't even have an agent anymore. I just literally, they call me and I do these fabulous, hysterical, they're not hysterically funny, but they're just really great, edge of your seat movies, and they're always starring Vivica Fox and Eric Roberts. I just have another one coming out, and this weekend they're called The Wrong. So it's like the wrong student, the wrong neighbor, the wrong female, the wrong teacher, and I do a bunch of those, and I think they do marathons of them, so you can see me in all those. And then there's a Christmas movie that I did for Lifetime too. It's called A Husband for Christmas. It's always on. So basically, I just do Lifetime movies now.
Well, it's a good life. It's a good way to do it.
Yeah, and I'm happy. I mean, I worked my whole life. I worked since I was a teenager, and I love acting. It's really fun. But at my age, I just didn't want to be going on auditions. And my friends like Roseanne Arquette and Daryl Hannah, they were famous movie stars, and it's hard to get jobs as you get older. So I thought I wasn't even famous really. So it's a great life because I get a call and I'm like, sure, I'll show up, and I don't have to stress about it. And I do, I surf, I do stained glass, I knit, I have a really quiet life down here. Nobody knows me. It's great. I love not living in Hollywood, and I live on, the beautiful canal and right next to the beach, and it's fun. I earned it.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. 100% you did. So for the aspiring actors that are listening today, what would be your advice to them on how to really take their acting to the next level?
Well, this is the thing. It's such a different world than when I grew up. I mean, we didn't have Instagram. We didn't have any means. If you wanted to get a job back then, you could not. You had to rely on other people. You had to get an agent. You had to go on auditions. We had headshots. If we got a part, we had to drive, pick up your sides, during the day and drive back. You couldn't even get them, online or anything. Eventually you could have towards the end of my career, but you guys have such a great advantage. You can make funny Instagrams, YouTubes, TikToks. People are getting famous, from that. I think nowadays when they cast you, they go to see on how many Instagram followers you have. So if you want to be an actor or an actress, like, do it. Just do it. You can do it now for yourself, and get yourself out there. It's so much better.
So Hilary, how do folks find out about what you're doing these days?
You can go to @Hilary Shepard on Instagram. There's some funny things on there where I reenact my Star Trek Deep Space Nine part, and I talk back to the character, or I, talk along with her. So if you look at some of my old Instagram posts, I'll do some more in the future if you guys like them. I got some great response to that. I even did I'm Yvonne and this is it Golden Girls one. I do
nice.
A lot of Power Ranger one. So that's @Hilary Shepard. And I have the Real Divatox on Twitter, which I don't really tweet that much, and I have a Facebook fan page, the Real Divatox. So you can follow me on all those things and check out Daryl Hannah and my Instagram, Judaisms.nooffense. It's really funny, and that's how you can find me. And also watch Lifetime because I'm always on there.
All right. So last question for you today, Hilary, and that's, what is your favorite thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe?
My favorite thing is the fandom. I mean, as an actor back then, when we didn't have social media, you didn't get any feedback. You didn't know. I had no idea that people remembered me and knew who I was. And when I went to my, first Star Trek convention, I couldn't believe how many people knew who I was and remembered me. And I love I love that it's a fandom that never goes away. And same thing with the Power Rangers. It's great. So thank all of you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I gotta say, it's easy to see why you're such a fan favorite at conventions. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you today. It's been a real joy, a lot of great stories. So thank you for your time, and thank you for being just so great with all the fans like myself and everybody else who's listening today.
Great. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
That was our discussion with Hilary Shepard, who was an absolute blast to chat with. I've got to add, when she called me for this interview, she accidentally had it set on video first, and let me tell you guys, Hilary has not aged a day. She looks exactly the way she did in the 90s, so she's either got an amazing skincare routine, great genetics, or is possibly some kind of day-walking vampire. Either way, she remains gorgeous, and she was so much fun to speak with. I definitely urge you guys out there to say hi to her if you ever run into her at a convention sometime. Statistical Probabilities was one of Alexander Siddig's favorite episodes of Deep Space Nine, who enjoyed both the humor and the political issues it touched upon. Initially, the Jackpack scenes were planned to take place in the wardroom, but they were moved to the cargo bay in order to give them more space, and also as a nod of how Starfleet may be perceiving these characters, and how they were treated not necessarily as well as the average human being would have been. Add to that the fact that they were essentially dumped on Deep Space Nine and left to be dealt with by Bashir with very little instructions. It tells you a lot about what they were kind of planning to go for with how those characters were meant to be perceived in the very beginning. But of course, as we saw in the episode, they proved themselves to be just as valuable as every other member on board Deep Space Nine. And sure, they may have briefly cosplayed as some Starfleet admirals, but you know what? They looked pretty good cosplaying in those Starfleet admiral uniforms. I think they would have fit in just fine if Starfleet decided to actually involve them as part of the organization. For you Star Trek collectors out there, 2 of the outfits Hilary wore in this episode ended up as part of the It's a Wrap sale and auction, which took place at the end of 2006 and into late 2007. You could have had them for relatively cheap, too, as one went for slightly over $108, with the second selling for just under $130. That's a pretty great bargain to own a piece of Star Trek history, if you ask me. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Trek Untold. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this show, and if you can, leave a review and rating. We would appreciate it very much if you did. You can also follow us on social media. Just look for Trek Untold on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you there, and of course, we'd like to hear your thoughts about this week's episode. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can check out patreon.com/TrekUntold to learn how you can keep our ship operating at full power. And you can also check out some of our merchandise at teespring.com/stores/TrekUntold. Once again, thank you to our sponsor, Triple Fiction Productions. This has been Trek Untold. I'm Matthew Kaplowitz, and until next time, fortune favors the bold.